Hi, my name is Sam. No, I'm not Alec Burleson, and welcome to Stat Chat, Episode 1. Today, we're going to talk about Mr. Paul Goldschmidt, or as he's currently being referred to as Paul Oldschmidt, because he's having a terrible start to his 2024 campaign. And that has a lot of Cardinal fans talking. I'm a Cardinal fan. Everyone on Twitter is saying, hey, just get used to it. He has bad starts. I wanted to check and see if that's something that actually is the case or if that's just something Cardinal fans talk and there's really no data to back that up. So what I'm here to do today is to look and see, does Paul Goldschmidt have a problem to start the season? Does he heat up, and is it just a problem of cold starts? And if that is true, is there a specific month where you can really pinpoint it to where this is really where he starts to take off, where his season really starts to take control and he settles in? What I did to do that is I went to Baseball Savant and I split up Paul Goldschmidt's batting average, on base percentage, and slugging percentage by and split it up by month for every single month he's been a member of the St. Louis Cardinals, excluding 2020 for obvious reasons. And this set of data here, I put everything in green where he had an increase from 1 month to the next month and a decrease in red from 1 month to the next month in average, on base, and slugging. And if it were true that he does get off to cold starts, you would tend to see something where you would expect to see an increase from month to month. You would expect to see it be green in May or June, and this set of data doesn't necessarily show you that that's the case. I like to look at 2022, for example, because he has pretty pedestrian statistics in his March and April of 2022. But by the time you jump to May, that slug went from 372 to 817. So naturally, the stuff in red that's behind it, the 636 slug and the 512 slug, well, those are still incredibly good statistics for an individual month. It's going to appear as bad because it's in red on this set of statistics. So as we all know, if something's in green, it means it's good, and if something's in red, it means it's bad. That's how stats work. There is stuff you can, take away from this set of data, though. And in particular, his 2021, there's only one time where one of his individual statistics in a month dipped. He was incredible and only kept getting better as the year went on. He didn't start too hot, though, and that's something we'll get into more. A 214 average, a 257 on base, and a 340 slug. Those all increased to the next month, and the next month, and the next month, and the next month, and he just kept getting better to where eventually his cumulative stats ended with a 294, a 365, and a 514 slug, which is very, very good, and on par with the rest of his, or above on par with the rest of his statistics during his time with the Cardinals so far. I also split it up first and second half to see, does he get better in the second half every time, and that's not the case either. As you can see, in 22 and 23, every single one of his statistics dipped. And not just dipped a little bit. You can see in 2022, that was the case where they were just slightly worse. But in 2023, everything got considerably worse. So yeah, you can see that this set of data, there is stuff to take away, but it wasn't really leading me to the answers of the question I asked. So I split it up a second time, this time comparing his stats split up from month to month, comparing that to league average. So every single statistic in green you see is something that Goldschmidt was better than the league average in, and everything in red is worse. So as we look in 2019, he was playing just about a little above league average. His slug was a little higher, but 259 average compared to a league average of 252. 348 on base compared to 323 on base. So there was nothing really there to show me that he had a slow start, but he was about league average. And then he really, really dipped here. May and June. In June, he had a 181 average, 274 on base, and 309 slug. That is very bad, and that actually might be his very worst month as a Cardinal if it weren't for his current March and April start right now. But I highlighted in yellow here what I think you can consider like this is the break point where you can tell he may have found something right here. And in 2019, that wasn't until July. He was off to a pretty slow start until July, where he had a 308 average, 360 on base, and 725 slug. Pretty impressive slug right there. So he was a above a league average player there. Didn't have a wonderful August, but then ended up with okay stats overall. As you can see, his Cumulative stats here, 260 average, 346 on base, and 476 slug. Those are all a little bit better than league average that year. So Goldschmidt, while not having an impressive 2019, you can really argue, yes, he did kind of get off to a slow start for a few months and then really found something in July before having a slower August. Now, 2021, that was the impressive season I talked about before, where his stats continued to rise every single month of the season. And he did get off to a slow start here as well. 214 average, 257 on base, 340 slug, all lower and considerably lower than the league average that year. And in the month of May, as you can see, he jumped up to a 265 average, 350 on base, 422 slug. All of those were a tad above league average, and he just continued to get better and better. I mean, look at the slug. 490 the month after that, 559, 602, 670. So 2021 was a season where he had just a continual uptick from month to month in every single statistical category except for batting average. And even then, when his batting average fell from 350 to 330, 330 was still well above the league average, which is 244. So he had a very impressive 2021. And I highlighted the month of May was the season where he kind of figured it out and put it together. And 2022, very similar. He had a 282 average, 356 on base, and 372 slug in the month of March and April. And right here, as you can see, those statistics are still above, or in the case of slug, right around or a tick below league average. So he wasn't even a poor player in the months of March and April. He just wasn't playing to the all-star caliber player that we know him to be. And then again in the month of May, everything jumped up a ton. 404 average, 471 on base, and an impressive 817 slug, which is his best slugging percentage for an individual month as while he's been a member of the Cardinals. So this month alone, you can absolutely say he put it together. Even though his average and on base weren't really that poor in the months of March and April, both of those took an impressive jump into the month of May. And this is the season that he won MVP. So his month of May, even June, his slug was super high. Average was really high on base. He cooled off a little bit by the end of the season. As you can see, in September and October, he had a 245 average, which is just barely above league average. 333 on base, which is just a couple points above the league average on base. And a 386 slug, which was below the league average slugging percentage that year. But as you can see, like, he had that MVP wrapped up because of the middle months he put together right here. And then 2023, a really bad season for the Cardinals, but not really the case for Paul Goldschmidt. Again, you can only see 3 instances where an individual statistic was worse than the league average. And he kind of started off like from the jump in 2023. March and April combined, 306 average, 405 on base, 509 slug. Those are all considerably above the league average, and he continued to play above league average, although the slug percentage did dip and then dip below league average right here. Paul Goldschmidt still had a very, very good 2023, which I was a little shocked at. The season was so demoralizing that you kind of expected him and Arenado, who is someone else maybe I should take a look at something like this for. But you would expect them to have really, really bad seasons, considering they're the face of the Cardinals, and the Cardinals had such a terrible season. But no, Goldschmidt had a really, really good 2023, all things considered. Worse than what we have been seeing. I mean, his average in 2021 was 294, 317 in 2022, and then down to 268. But that was still above league average by 0.02 percentage points. On-base percentage was higher. Slugging was higher. So he did have a above average to good season for the Cardinals. It's just kind of buried underneath what we know to be a really, really terrible season overall. And then 2024, as the time we're recording this, they've played 19 games, and he is averaging 182, 289 on base percentage, and his slug is a pitiful 227. And that's something else too. If anything really took a dip his entire career with the Cardinals, it was his slugging percentage. The power just wasn't there. His plate discipline, as you can see by his on-base percentage, should still be considerably high, but the slugging percentage and the power is something that takes a back seat whenever he is in a little bit of a slump. And it just seems like everything's slumping right now. 182 average is pitiful. 289 on base percentage is not pitiful, but it's bad. It's not very good at all. And then the slug, as you can see, is well below league average. And he's only hit 1 home run in the season of 2024. And that's another thing that I wanted to draw attention to see if Goldschmidt really does get off to slow starts, is the homers, is the power. As you can see on this graphic here, I've listed out every single home run he's hit in an individual month, his entire career. I didn't include 2011 because that wasn't his first full season. 2012 was. And as you can see, he's hit 47 home runs total, and that's not including the one he's hit this year, but he's hit 47 home runs total in the months of March and April combined, compared to 62, 65, 53, 58, and 42. So this actually illuminated something new to me as well, is that 42 home runs in the months of September and October. And that does include zeros for 2014 when he ended the season injured. But he really finds his groove in the middle of the season and then tapers off. He not only has a slow start, but he has a slow finish. Even in the 2022 season where he won MVP, every single statistic took a considerable dip, and then his slugging percentage was below league average. So yeah, Goldschmidt does get off to cold starts. The evidence does support that he can get off to a cold start. That's happened really kind of you could argue 3 out of the 4 full seasons he's played with the Cardinals. He kind of got off to a slow start, particularly in 21 and 22, mostly 21, but he also kind of finishes the season cold as well. I mean, 2023, that was pretty obvious. 2022, if we can remember his, he was just so scorching hot to be in the middle of the season that by the time it got to the end, his pedestrian statistics and even below league average just by a tick statistics weren't enough to counteract the MVP season he did have. But yeah, he does sort of have this graph that sort of looks like, it peaks in the middle of the season and then comes back down towards the end of the season. And I did this with every single month that he's been a member of the St. Louis Cardinals, but is that, something that we can look at for his entire career? So here we have this set of data right here. Every single year he's been a member of the Arizona Diamondbacks. And I did the same thing I did with the first graph here, where his season splits, his rolling statistics. Was it better or worse than the month beforehand? In 2012, that's his first full season. I mean, he was basically a rookie at this point, so 193 average, 288 on base, 281 slug. Those aren't good, but again, he was super young. That was his first season. So we have his 190, everything got better, of course. 314 average, 379, 535 slug. So yeah, he did, have a bad month to start the season, and then found his groove in May and June, and then came back to earth a little bit in July and August. 2013, his statistics did get better for the second month in May. 2014, this was kind of an injury-riddled season by the end. His statistics don't really reflect that he had a bad month to start. I mean, obviously, 323 average, 368 on base, 516 slug. Those things took a little bit of a dip, but were still not horrible. But if we look at 2015, 16, 17, and 18, you can see that he did have a pretty good month to start all of those seasons as well. So this isn't necessarily something that affected his playing time or like something that people thought about with Goldschmidt while he was a part of the Diamondbacks, but it's been a constant thing that Cardinal fans talk about. So the data does support that while he's been a member of the Cardinals, he does get off to slow starts. Not really the case when he was with Arizona. I did the same thing down here where I took the league averages and compared them to Goldschmidt's stats. Again, in red is when he was below league average, green when he was above league average. And yeah, he had a bad month in 2012, and there wasn't much else. It's a lot of green on this page. This doesn't show month to month if there was an increase or decrease, but really just shows was he having a good month or bad month. He had a pretty poor month to end 2017. He had a pretty poor month in, month of May in 2018. Whoops. All right, I guess we're doing that now. But yeah, everything else is above league average, even if it's not setting the world on fire. He is an above league average player. Not a lot of slow starts here in his Arizona career compared to his season splits while he's been a member of the St. Louis Cardinals. Yeah, he is obviously off to a pretty terrible start. I don't know really what you can attribute that to. Maybe he'll figure it out by the month of May and he'll go off. I mean, in 2022, he had an 817 slug. We've seen he's capable of months like that and can just go on a tear of homers. So, and a lot of that has to do, too, is he's 36 now. Those years with Arizona were his rookie season, his first few seasons in the bigs, followed by his sort of peak years. And we got some more peak years back here. He won MVP in 2022, probably should have won MVP one or two more times while he was a member of the Diamondbacks. He's so underrated still to this day, but right now he is playing terribly. He is one of the worst batters on the St. Louis Cardinals right now, but it's Paul Goldschmidt. You can't bench him, right? What are you going to do? We know he has the capabilities to go off later in the season. I'm just hoping it comes sooner rather than later, and while the trends do show that he's had his worst months to really start the season, it can get bad by the end too. So I hope he figures it out, puts a few decent months into the season in the middle before a natural taper off towards the end of the season, if that is to happen. So yeah, the data does support that. The slow start thing is real, and it has been real since he's been a Cardinal. Not really a Diamondback, but it's really a Cardinals problem. So yeah, that's really all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll have another episode out next week. We'll be talking about trends. We'll be talking about players. We'll be talking about anything and everything baseball related as the season continues. So I appreciate you watching. Join me next week for another episode of Stat Chat.